Hello, life groups, and welcome to this second session on Proverbs, Wisdom for Life. So, just to remind you of our plan of attack for Proverbs, we started our first session looking at what is wisdom, and we looked at Solomon and went through some of the background of the book of Proverbs and some helpful tips for understanding and applying the book. And today we're going to look at knowing God. And then we'll go on to look at knowing others, knowing your heart, knowing times and seasons, and applying knowledge in life. So hopefully you've just watched the talk on knowing God. So here are a couple of questions for you based upon that. Why don't you pause me and have a crack at answering these? So what does it mean to fear God? Well, a worshipful submission out of love is perhaps a fairly good definition. It's connected to our love for him, where we want to please him. And why is the fear of the Lord the beginning of wisdom? I just brought out 2 points. One, that God is the eternal one and God is the perfect one. There are lots of other points you could bring out as well as to why the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. You could say God is the creator. So, he made us and made everything that we see and know. So it makes sense to go to the one who created everything to gain his wisdom and insight. You could say God is the sovereign one. He's the one who has the power to do whatever he chooses, whenever he chooses. And therefore, again, the fear of him is the beginning of wisdom. We're going to move on in this session to do a study of Proverbs chapter 2. We're going to read through the whole chapter together. So why don't you pause me and read the first 5 verses. Okay, so the first 5 verses kind of ask us to search for wisdom. This father is speaking to this son, Solomon speaking to his descendants, if you like. And I want us to just notice the kind of strength of vocabulary used to encourage us to search out for wisdom. Lots of really strong words there: accept, store up, turning your ear. Just have a think about those quickly, and then have a crack at answering this question. What character traits will help you pursue wisdom? What character traits will help you pursue wisdom? Okay, when you're ready for the next question. What character traits will not help you pursue wisdom? And then have you, a couple of you perhaps, got a story of seeking wisdom for a decision? How did you go about doing that? Great. We'll now move on to verse 5 to 8. So why don't you pause me? And this section is looking at how God gives wisdom. So we can see here how God is instrumental in the giving of wisdom. And some people can treat Proverbs separate from a relationship with God and just try and pick out some of the wisdom, and it could be used in that way. But really, Proverbs is a book about God. And as we saw in the main session, that the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. It's foundational and flows throughout the whole book. And so here, there's a real strong emphasis on God giving wisdom. But it'd be good to delve just a little bit deeper into this understanding the fear of the Lord. And here are a couple of scriptures that mention fear in the New Testament. And why don't you discuss together while reading these, what does it mean to fear God? Why don't you pause me and I'll try and answer that question. What does it mean to fear God? Great. We're now going to move on to the third section of chapter 2, and we're going to see some of the benefits of fearing God, of pursuing wisdom, of seeking him for wisdom. So why don't you read this and pause me up to 15, and then there'll be another slide as well. And here's the other slide. Great. So this last section of chapter 2 describes a lot of benefits of pursuing wisdom, of prizing wisdom, of seeking wisdom from God. Why don't you talk about some of these benefits? And maybe a couple of you have got a story of seeing the benefit of pursuing God-given wisdom in your life. Why don't you have a think about if you've got a story in your life and share that? Great. If you've got some more time, you might just like to go on to think about the consequences of pursuing God's wisdom. Although there are benefits that are listed in all these verses, many, many benefits, what are some of the consequences of pursuing God's wisdom? And there are a couple of scriptures to help you in your discussion, 1 Peter 4, 3-5, and 1 Corinthians 3, 18-20. Great. So we've seen that in chapter 2 that we are encouraged to search for wisdom, to really go after it. We've seen that actually God gives wisdom, and foundational to that is a fear of Him, a worshipful submission to Him in your life, out of a love for Him. And then we've seen that actually there are loads of benefits of doing this in your life and putting God first. But we've also seen there are some consequences as well for putting God first. Why don't you have a time now to pray and pray for one another? Maybe some of you got some big decisions coming up. Maybe you really need some wisdom from God. Why don't you pray together and pray that we as a church community would pursue God's wisdom no matter what the short-term costs are. Thank you.